You shouldn't be out here alone, sir. Not dressed like that. Not at 3 a.m. in downtown Lagos." Zuri Okafor didn't say it out loud, but the thought struck her like a warning bell as she stepped outside the staff entrance of the old Kalimba Inn, the night air thick with smoke from street vendors still packing up. Rain had turned the street into a glistening snake of puddles and reflections. The man stood hunched near the curb, rain slicking his expensive wool coat. He didn't move. Then suddenly, his knees buckled and he crumpled onto the wet pavement. For a few seconds, no one did anything. Across the street, two men in ragged hoodies leaned against a shuttered electronics kiosk. One nudged the other, both staring at the fallen figure like hyenas spotting a wounded antelope. Zuri didn't wait. She dropped her mop bucket with a splash and ran. Her shoes skidded through water as she crouched beside the man, saw the flash of a gold-trimmed business card poking out from his soaked wallet. His eyes fluttered open but didn't focus. He groaned, incoherent. She checked for blood, then pulled him up, her wiry strength surprising even herself. The two men were crossing now, casual but intent. "Sir, we're going inside. Now." She dragged him toward the staff door, his feet scraping like sandbags, her heart pounding louder than the thunder above. She got them through just as the two strangers reached the sidewalk, didn't look back. Inside, she eased him onto a bench near the laundry room. He sagged against the wall, rain dripping from his collar, shoes leaving muddy streaks on the tile. Zuri grabbed the wallet from the floor and rifled through the contents. The ID read, Langston Mwamba. She blinked. "No way," she whispered. Anthony, the night clerk, peeked around the corner. "Everything okay?" She held up the card. He froze. "That's him? Can you verify it?" He took one look and swore under his breath. "Zuri, that's Langston Mwamba. He owns Kalimba Inn and half of Lagos." She looked down at the man slumped on the bench. The owner, passed out drunk, alone, in the rain. She pulled her cracked phone from her apron and called a cab. "We're not leaving him here," she muttered, "and I'm not letting some greedy driver steal his card details." When the cab arrived 15 minutes later, she stuffed a 10,000 naira note into the driver's hand. "Take him to the Mandarin residences. No charges. Just drop him safe." The driver raised an eyebrow but nodded. Zuri heaved Langston into the back seat, belted him in, and closed the door. He mumbled something just before she shut it. "You good people. Remember, that matters." She stood still after the cab disappeared, rain finally letting up. Her hoodie clung to her like a second skin. Inside the lobby, the clock glowed 3:52 a.m. Just another night at Kalimba Inn, but it didn't feel like it. She peeled off her wet sweater and headed to the lockers, not knowing that the ripple she'd started would turn into a wave. The following Thursday, just after the breakfast rush, the brass bell above the front door chimed. Zuri was folding napkins at the end of the counter. She glanced up and her heart skipped. Crisp charcoal suit, eyes clear and sharp, beard trimmed. Standing tall like he belonged in a boardroom, not a puddle. Langston Mwamba. "Excuse me," he said, smooth and steady. She didn't blink. "Looks like you're walking just fine. Cab did its job." "It wasn't the cab that saved me," he said. "I didn't do anything special." "Then it's a shame no one else did." He took a step closer. "I looked into you." Her stomach clenched. "Don't get ahead of yourself. You dropped out of Uniport to care for your mother, been working 3 jobs. You keep this place running while the manager steals from the till. You paid for my cab ride, out of your own pocket. You making a lot of assumptions." "No," he said gently. "Just facts." He pulled a leather folder from his coat, laid it on the counter. "I own this hotel, and several others. Kalimba Inn was due to be sold next month. Bad numbers, corrupt management. I was done." She raised an eyebrow. "So, if you're firing me, you're dressed too nicely. I'm not firing you. I'm giving you the keys." The napkin tore in her hands. "Excuse me. I'm giving you this hotel, Zuri." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "Why?" "Because you didn't let me die on a rainy curb like trash. Because you have more integrity in your soaked hoodie than my entire management board. People don't just give away hotels. And people don't usually pull billionaires out of the gutter." She stared at the folder. "I need time." "You've got it. Everything is in there. My lawyer will walk you through it. And if I say no, then I'll walk away, but I hope you won't." He turned to leave, then paused. "You don't wait for permission to do what's right. That's rare." Then he was gone. That night, after wiping down tables, Zuri sat in the empty lobby, the folder unopened on her lap. She looked around the room she'd scrubbed for years, now realizing she might actually own it. She opened the folder. Legal documents, wire transfers, budget lines cleared, renovation plans, all under her name. At the end, a handwritten note: "You gave a stranger dignity. Let this give you the same. L.M." Her breath hitched. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. But every page said it was. She picked up her phone, dialed the number to her mother's care home. "Mama." "Zuri, baby, it's late. Are you all right? I think someone just gave me a hotel." There was a pause. Then, "Well, damn." The next morning, Zuri walked into Kalimba Inn not as a cleaner, but as its possible future. Anthony looked up as she passed the front desk. "You opened the folder." She nodded. "So, what now?" She didn't answer. She walked into the manager's office, a place she'd only glimpsed from the hallway. The air was musty. Papers piled high. She sat down at the desk, opened drawers, found half-empty liquor bottles, receipts with no vendor names, fake invoices, a list of payments to companies she'd never heard of. It wasn't just mismanaged, it was rotten. By lunchtime, she'd confirmed 3 vendors were fake. One listed a pest control company registered to a P.O. box in Abuja. Another billed monthly for security updates that never happened. That night, Zuri called Langston's lawyer. "Why would someone give me a mess to clean?" she asked. The voice on the other end was calm. "Because he believes you're the one person who won't pretend it's clean." Zuri hung up and sat alone in the office. The inn buzzed quietly around her, but she felt something new stirring under the floor. Not just fear, something electric. The beginning of a reckoning. Zuri Okafor sat in the manager's office long after midnight, the room dimly lit by a single desk lamp that buzzed like an old mosquito. Around her, stacks of invoices formed crooked towers, and on the floor lay yellow sticky notes marking vendors she could not trace, payments she could not explain, names that echoed through the books like shadows with no faces. One name kept repeating: Eastwell Services Limited. Supposedly responsible for everything from landscaping to linen delivery. But Zuri had never seen a single person from Eastwell, not once in all her years working at Kalimba Inn. Their payments were oddly consistent too, always under 2.5 million naira, like someone deliberately staying just below an audit trigger. The deeper she dug, the more patterns emerged, and the more nauseous she felt. It wasn't just sloppy bookkeeping. It was too structured, too precise. Someone had been siphoning money through the inn for years. A low thud behind her made her jump. It was Anthony, holding 2 steaming mugs. "I figured you're still here," he said, stepping inside. "You look like you've aged 5 years since yesterday." "Feels like 10, she muttered, accepting the tea gratefully. "You found something?" he asked, nodding at the sea of papers. "I found a ghost," she replied. "Or maybe a leech. Either way, this place has been bleeding quietly for years." Anthony frowned. "Carl?" She nodded. "Carl and someone else. There's no way he pulled this off alone." She hesitated. "Do you remember anyone odd visiting him? Late nights?" Anthony scratched his chin. "There was a guy. Always wore suits, drove a silver BMW, called himself Mr. K or King or something. I thought he was an investor." Zuri's breath stilled. "Was he ever introduced formally?" "No. Carl said he was above our pay grade." Zuri jotted the name down. Mr. K. That night, she stayed until the muezzins began to call the early dawn prayer. Then she slipped out of the inn, clutching a file of copied invoices and a memory card full of photos she'd taken of the books. She didn't know what she was building yet, only that she needed to finish what she had started. The next afternoon, after hours of failed web searches and cross-referencing government business registries, she posted an anonymous query in an online forum for whistleblowers and corruption reporters. Within 20 minutes, she got a reply. "Eastwell Services. Watch for the initials VK. That's not a vendor, that's a front." Her pulse kicked. VK, Mr. K. She clicked on the profile of the commenter. It had no photo, no bio, just a link to an archived article from 2 years ago about a hotel in Port Harcourt shut down after being used to launder oil money. Same MO, fake vendors, ghost staff, and a quiet disappearance of the man behind it all, Vincent Kalu. Zuri leaned back in her chair, the weight of the name anchoring itself into her chest. She didn't know this man, but he knew Kalimba Inn, and he'd used it. That evening, she printed every piece of evidence she had. She didn't tell Anthony, didn't even tell her mother during their daily call. Some truths needed to settle before they could be spoken. 2 nights later, just before closing, the lobby door opened. Zuri was wiping down the front desk. She looked up. He stepped in like he owned the room. Tall, slim, charcoal suit, freshly pressed, skin the color of roasted coffee. His smile arrived before he spoke. "Good evening," he said smoothly. Zuri's throat tightened. "We're fully booked." "That's all right," he said. "I'm not here to check in. Just wanted to see the place, the buzz." He glanced around. "You've done well. Softer lighting, better scent, feels lived in." "Do I know you?" she asked. "Call me Vincent," he said, laying a sleek black card on the counter. No contact info, just the letter V embossed in gold. Zuri didn't touch it. "I hear you've been digging," he said, eyes still smiling. "Calling old vendors, asking about contracts that should have stayed buried. That's not very hospitable." Zuri folded her arms. "I'm just trying to run a clean business." "No," he said, his voice suddenly quiet, razor thin. "You're trying to play hero in a story you don't understand." "You're right," she said. I don't understand how someone like you gets to disappear while the rest of us clean up the wreckage." His jaw twitched, barely noticeable. "Smart girl," he said, "but smart doesn't mean safe." He straightened his cuffs. "You got a good thing going here. Paint the walls, serve your jollof rice, but stop looking behind doors that don't belong to you." "Or what?" she asked, her voice steady. He didn't answer, just gave her a final look, the kind people gave chessboards when they were already 10 moves ahead. Then he turned and walked out, quiet as shadow. Zuri stood still for a long time after he left. Then she moved. Straight to the office. "Anthony," she called, "get Carla on the phone. I want the locks changed, front, back, storage, all of it. And I want surveillance cameras installed before Friday." He stared. "What happened?" "Vincent Caillou," she said. "He was here." His face went pale. "He threatened you?" "Not with words, with calm, with presence, with silence." That night, Zuri sat in her small apartment above the seamstress shop next door, lights off, laptop open. She compared addresses, matched vendor names, searched board member overlaps, traced LLC filings. At 2:14 a.m., she found it. Westridge Holdings, Shell Company, same name tied to 3 hotels under investigation in Ghana. And Vincent Caillou sat on their advisory board. She copied every file onto a secure USB, labeled the folder Insurance. Then she pried up the floorboard beneath her bed and slid the drive into a black envelope, writing one word on the front: Proof. The next morning, the retaliation began. First, the freezer failed. Then, the fire inspector arrived with a surprise citation. Later, a delivery truck backed into their loading dock, cracking the concrete. 3 incidents, 1 day. Zuri filled out damage forms with shaking hands. Carla sat across from her. "This ain't bad luck." "No," Zuri said. "It's a warning." That night, she gathered the staff in the lobby. No pretense, no fluff. "Someone used this hotel to hide money, and they're not happy, I found out." The room went silent. Jenny, the housekeeper, looked down. Miguel from maintenance scoffed. "This isn't our fight." "It is now," Zuri said, "because if we ignore it, we're part of it." Anthony asked, "What are you going to do?" "Tell the truth," she said. The next day, she called a name she had found in the same forum that warned her. Sarah Udoka, investigative journalist for The Guardian, Nigeria. When they met in a quiet cafe downtown, Zuri laid it all out. Files, photos, names, contracts. "If I send this to the police, it'll disappear," she said. "I need light, not silence." Sarah picked up the USB. "This isn't just a vendor scheme. This is a pipeline." "I know," Zuri said. "And if I get swept into it, I want someone to remember why I tried." "You're not the first to try," Sarah said, "but you might be the first with a building full of witnesses who don't look away." 2 days later, The Guardian ran the story. Front page, title bold and unapologetic. "Inn of Shadows, How Kalimba Was Used to Move Millions." It named Vincent, it named Carl, it named the shell companies, and it named Zuri. By noon, her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Local radio, Channel 5, NGOs asking how to support. And by 3 p.m., 2 detectives walked through the inn's front doors. "We'd like to speak to Miss Okafor." "That's me," she said. As they entered the office, Anthony whispered to Carla, "You think she's in trouble?" Carla didn't blink. "No, I think trouble just realized she fights back." Zuri Okafor stood outside Kalimba Inn the morning after the article dropped. The sun sharp and honest above Lagos like it knew everything. She watched the reporters pack up their vans, watched pedestrians slow down as they passed, eyes wide with curiosity and caution. The hotel had never been this noticed. For years, it was just another tired building with flickering lights and a leaky roof. Now, it was a symbol, a battlefield, a question hanging in the air. What now? Inside, the lobby buzzed with an anxious sort of silence. Carla was organizing linen orders, Anthony refreshed the booking system for the third time in 10 minutes, and Jenny sat at the corner table, sharpening pencils like she might need to write something that would change the world. Zuri walked past them, nodded once, and locked herself in the office. She pulled out the envelope labeled Proof, opened a new folder on her laptop, and began digitizing everything. She renamed the office Operations Center because that's what it had become. Not a place for bureaucracy, but a war room. That afternoon, the retaliation resumed. Not loud this time, but quiet and unnerving. The hotel received anonymous emails claiming false bookings. Food deliveries they hadn't ordered arrived, and when they politely refused, the vendors accused them of theft. A man claiming to be from the water board came in demanding access to the basement Zuri called the real water board. They hadn't sent anyone. Vincent hadn't disappeared. He was testing the edges, looking for cracks. She didn't flinch. She tightened security, replaced every lock again, even had 2 friends from secondary school, both now working in cybersecurity, sweep the hotel's Wi-Fi for digital surveillance. That evening, Zuri received a package, no return address. Inside was a single envelope. Her name written in silver ink on black paper. She opened it slowly. The message was typed. You may think you've won. You've embarrassed powerful people. But don't mistake attention for protection. Some debts don't disappear, they wait. She didn't panic. She didn't cry. She added the letter to a new file titled Threats. Then she called Sarah Udoka. They're watching, she said. The journalist didn't hesitate. Then we go louder. 2 days later, The Guardian ran the follow-up. This time not about corruption, but about Zuri, the woman who pulled a billionaire out of a gutter and then uncovered an empire built on deception. It wasn't just a news story, it was a rally cry. Donations came in from old Lagos families now living abroad. Someone from Johannesburg sent a letter saying Zuri reminded them of their mother. A retired judge wrote a check with a note for the woman who reminded this block of its worth. The inn transformed again. Guests stopped in just to take photos. Former employees reached out to volunteer. The reception desk now smelled of lemon polish and fresh ginger. Zuri didn't smile much, but her eyes were clearer. Carla brought in flowers for the lobby every Monday. Jenny started an after-school reading corner in the old conference room. Anthony ran the payroll system like it was a church register. But Zuri knew peace was not the same as safety. And just because the sabotage had stopped didn't mean the war had. That's why she partnered with a local community patrol. She trained in basic self-defense every Sunday, not out of fear, out of intent. One evening, just after sunset, she sat on the hotel's front steps sipping chamomile tea, watching a mother push a stroller down the block. The sky turned indigo, the street quiet except for the distant call of a hawker selling suya. A black car pulled up, tinted windows. Zuri stood slowly. The door opened. But it wasn't Vincent. It was a woman, elderly, silver hair twisted into a low bun, dressed in a deep blue wrapper with gold embroidery. Elegant, steady. She walked with a cane. Her eyes were dark and kind and far too sharp to miss anything. "You must be Zuri," she said. Zuri nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "My name is Veronica Kalu," the woman said. "Vincent is my son." Silence folded between them. Zuri didn't move. "I'm not here to defend him," Veronica continued. "He's made choices I could never excuse, but I read what you did, and what you built, and I needed to see it." She pulled a small velvet pouch from her handbag. "This belonged to my late husband. He was an architect. He built housing here when no one else would. I think he would have liked you." She handed the pouch over. "Please use it to keep building." She turned and left. No further words. No drama. Zuri stood on the steps alone, stunned, heart full. Inside the pouch was a check. 10 million naira. No strings, just belief. That night, Zuri didn't sleep. She sat at the edge of her bed, the pouch still in her lap, the folder of threats still under her floorboard, and a new notebook open beside her. On the first page, in bold black ink, she wrote, "We don't just run a hotel, we hold the door open." The next morning, she unveiled the new name. The sign crew arrived early. Carla stood beside her, arms crossed like a proud auntie. Jenny had brought cupcakes with little lantern symbols iced on top. Anthony filmed on his old phone. Zuri stood on a stool and spoke softly. "This building has held secrets. Now it holds truth. This name isn't just new paint. It's a promise." She pulled the sheet down. The new sign gleamed. The Lantern House, a place to belong. The crowd clapped. Not for show, for belief, for hope, for her. After the unveiling, Zuri stepped into the office, opened a new folder on the wall labeled Phase 2, and wrote down 3 goals: rooftop garden, scholarship fund, and a community resource library. She knew there would be more shadows, more storms, maybe even more letters, but now she had light, and light didn't ask permission to shine. Zuri Okafor stood at the edge of the parking lot just as the contractors lowered the old hotel sign from its rusted hooks, the faded lettering squealing in protest as it came down. Decades of silence and secrets embedded in each bolt and flake of worn paint. A few neighbors stood at a distance, watching quietly. Some with folded arms, some with coffee cups in hand. It wasn't just a physical change. It was the end of something toxic, and the beginning of something fiercely deliberate. The new sign, covered in a canvas sheet, sat on a rolling scaffold beside her. She hadn't shown anyone what it said, not even Carla or Anthony. She wanted the reveal to matter. Inside, the Lantern House buzzed with new rhythm. Walk-ins had tripled since the story ran. Local NGOs were asking to host events. A tech startup offered free Wi-Fi for the building. A nearby school dropped off a mural proposal. But it wasn't just buzz, it was purpose. Carla now ran a Sunday brunch for single mothers in the ballroom. Jenny turned the abandoned conference closet into a kid's book nook with string lights and beanbags. Anthony had started mentoring 3 high school students in bookkeeping and computer literacy, and one of them, Agioma, now manned the front desk on Saturdays, shadowing Zuri like a quiet storm preparing to change the weather. That afternoon, Zuri received another visitor. This time, she invited him. Langston Mwamba stepped out of the back of a discreet black car, no entourage, no photographer, no rehearsed charm. just a navy sweater and slacks and tired eyes. "You did what I never finished," he said softly as she greeted him in the courtyard. "No," Zuri replied, arms crossed. "I did what you were too scared to begin." He flinched, but he didn't argue. "I read the article, the second one. You gave this place back to the community." "No," she said again, firmer now. "I gave it to myself. The community joined me." She led him to the lobby, where Carla nearly dropped her clipboard upon seeing him. Anthony muttered something under his breath and walked into the back office, and Jenny offered a stiff nod before disappearing upstairs. Zuri didn't apologize for their reactions. She led him to a quiet corner. "What do you want?" she asked. "Closure," Langston said. "I have something for you." He handed her a manila envelope. Inside were property deeds, full title transfers, clean and notarized. "This time, you own the land. No leases, no silent partners, no contingencies." Zuri scanned the documents. It was all real, clean, final. "Why?" she asked. "Because I saw what you built," he said, "and I realized the only way to clean my name is to start by giving yours space to grow." She didn't thank him, not out loud, but she took the envelope, and for the first time, she saw not the man who dumped a broken business into her lap, but the one trying too late maybe, but trying to make amends. That evening, she climbed to room 301. The room where Carl had signed shady deals, where secrets had been buried in drawer bottoms and beneath loose tiles. Now it was repainted, airy, light-filled. A framed quote on the wall read, "To rebuild is harder than to destroy, but worth it." She stood at the window, watching the Lego skyline shimmer against the dusk, the city's heartbeat slow and stubborn below her. Downstairs, the first-ever Lantern House Community Gala was in full swing. The ballroom buzzed with jazz music and clinking plates. Kids ran across the hardwood floors in hand-me-down dress shoes. Elders played Ludo at the side tables, and a local high school quartet played Nina Simone covers like they'd lived every word. Zuri descended the stairs slowly, wearing a forest green dress borrowed from Jenny's cousin and a quiet, earned confidence that made her taller than she'd ever felt. Carla caught her halfway down and said, "If you don't get up there and claim your peach cobbler, I'm eating it myself." Laughter followed. Anthony was near the punch table debating World Cup stats with two retired bankers. Even Miguel, who once told her no one would follow a waitress, now helped the sound tech run mic cables. The community had come not to congratulate Zuri, but to stand beside her, to affirm that they were not just surviving, they were rising. When Jenny finished her acoustic set, the mic was passed to Zuri. She hesitated. Then Carla shot her that look, the one that meant don't argue unless you're ready to lose. Zuri took the mic and stood before 100 faces that were no longer strangers. "I don't have a speech," she began, "but I do have something to say." She paused, steadying herself. "When I was 12, I asked my mom why people called our block the Forgotten Quarter. She told me it wasn't forgotten. It was just waiting for someone to remember it mattered." She looked around. "I didn't build this alone. I signed some papers, yes, but every wall that stands, every light that shines, every door that opens here, it's because of you. You who stayed. You who showed up. You who fixed boilers and replaced linens and watched my back when I was scared. You didn't just help me fix a hotel. You helped me build a house with light, a house with roots, A house where no one gets left outside. The room stood still. Then applause. Not for show, but from the gut. That night, long after the tables were cleared and the guests went home and the lights dimmed, Zuri sat on the front steps beside Carla, sipping warm Zobo from a paper cup. The street was quiet, only the soft rumble of the city breathing in the dark. "I've been thinking," Zuri said, "we should start a scholarship, Lantern Legacy, for hospitality, or anything really." Carla nodded. "You're not stopping, are you?" Zuri smiled. "Not until this place stops being a comeback story. I want it to be a blueprint." Carla raised her cup. "To blueprints." Zuri tapped hers to it. "To building forward." Across the street, the neon sign of the pharmacy flickered off. A child waved from a balcony window. Zuri waved back. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe another letter. Maybe more silence. Maybe the return of ghosts in better suits. But she knew this. Whatever came, she wouldn't face it alone. Because the Lantern House wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who believed in starting again. It burned quietly, firmly, fiercely. A light for the weary. A door that didn't close. A future lit by every choice to keep going. 1 month after the Lantern House Gala, Zuri Okafor stood by the old vending machine in the lobby, sipping her second cup of coffee for the morning as a little boy dropped 2 coins into the slot and laughed when a bag of chin-chin tumbled out. He turned and flashed her a grin so wide it pulled something deep from her chest. The kind of ache that felt like pride and memory all at once. She remembered being his age, standing in bus terminals with her mother, hoping someone would see them, not around them, but truly see them. Now she was building a place where people felt seen, where the light didn't flicker when footsteps approached and the welcome didn't depend on what name was on your ID. The lobby was different now. The velvet chairs had been reupholstered in deep emerald green. The framed photos on the walls showed moments from the neighborhood. Kids playing football on dusty rooftops, street vendors dancing behind their stalls, elders sitting in front of barber shops waving at nothing and everything. The scent of lemon polish mingled with the warm smell of Carla's ginger cookies. A community board near the elevator listed weekly events: Sunday poetry, Wednesday book club, Friday open mic. Jenny had written each one in pastel chalk with little lantern doodles around the borders. Upstairs, the third-floor rooms were being painted by volunteers. Downstairs, Anthony and his intern Ijoma were setting up a new digital check-in system. But even in the bustle, Zuri felt something shift, an old presence returning. At 4:15 p.m. that day, Anthony brought her a black envelope. No return address. Her name again written in silver ink. He looked pale. "A man dropped this off," he said. "Didn't say a word. Just left it at the front desk." Zuri took it with steady hands, heart calm but alert. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed. "You may have survived the fire, Miss Okafor, but don't forget, shadows wait. They don't burn, they multiply." She closed the envelope, walked to the back office, opened the floor compartment and added it to her folder labeled Threats. Then she picked up her phone. "Sarah," she said as soon as the journalist answered. "They're still poking." Sarah arrived at the Lantern House that same evening, carrying a camera, a notebook, and a look that said she hadn't come to play. She read the letter twice, then looked at Zuri. "You're not obligated to keep going," she said gently. "You've already won the fight. The police made arrests. You've exposed them." Zuri shook her head slowly. Then why do they still think they can send this? Sarah studied her face for a long moment. Then her eyes sharpened. All right, then we go louder. The next weekend, The Guardian published a full-page profile not on corruption, but on resilience. The Lantern House, how one woman turned a crime scene into a sanctuary. It traced Zuri's journey not as a whistleblower, but as a builder, a caretaker, a quiet revolutionary. The article didn't show Zuri in a boardroom or courtroom. It showed her handing out tea at 6 a.m. to elderly guests, walking children home after evening tutoring sessions, patching the cracked pavement behind the inn with her own hands. And it went viral not just nationally, but across the diaspora. Donations poured in. But more than money, stories arrived. Women from Port Harcourt, men from Soweto, teenagers from Kigali, aunties from Ghana. People sent letters saying, "We're building one too," or "We didn't know we could start from here." One envelope from Abuja included a check for $15 million and a note that simply said, "Because you didn't wait for permission." With the funds, Zuri launched the Lantern Legacy Fund, a scholarship and community grant program for young women and boys raised by single mothers, for artisans starting over, for immigrants, for dreamers with no blueprint. Every week, they posted stories on the community board of those who received support: tailors, hairstylists, junior coders, culinary students. On Thursday evenings, Zuri hosted fireside chats in the ballroom. No microphones, no speeches, just stories shared in a circle. Stories of loss and courage, of second chances and choosing to stay when it was easier to run. The Lantern House stopped being a hotel. It became a compass, a place that pointed people home to themselves. And Zuri? She never put her name on the sign, never printed business cards, never wore anything flashier than her old blue work blazer. But people knew. You didn't book a room at the Lantern House without feeling her presence in the walls. Then, one morning, Veronica Kalu returned. She stepped through the glass door slowly, wearing a teal scarf and holding a small white box. Zuri greeted her with a hug. "You remember I said my husband built houses when no one would," Veronica said. "This was one of them. Kalimba Inn, 1974. He laid the foundation stone himself." She handed Zuri the box. Inside was a hand-carved wooden lantern, smooth and warm in the palm. Underneath, a note. "Light lasts when shared, so pass it on." That night, Zuri placed the lantern at the front desk, not on a shelf, not behind glass, but right at the center, where every guest could see it, touch it, feel it. 2 weeks later, a fire broke out in a restaurant 3 blocks away. Families were displaced. The Lantern House opened every room, no questions asked. Carla stayed up baking bread. Jenny organized kids' sleepover corners. Anthony handled registrations until dawn. And Zuri? She stood by the door until the last person came in. A mother with a newborn, exhausted, shivering. She handed her a blanket, led her to room 107, and said, "You're safe. You're home." When morning came, the news cameras showed up again. But they didn't find drama. They found kindness humming at 6 a.m. over tea and toast and folded linens. Zuri didn't give an interview. She just waved at the reporters and turned to mop the floor. Her light didn't need headlines. It needed fuel, and it burned anyway, quietly, boldly, without apology. Later that week, Anthony asked if she wanted to rest. "You've earned it," he said. Zuri smiled. "Rest is not a reward. It's part of the work. but I'll take a nap when the sidewalk out front stops cracking." He laughed, then handed her a framed certificate one of the guests had left behind. It read, "Thank you for not asking who we were before letting us in." Zuri didn't cry. She just placed it next to the carved lantern. That night, she sat on the roof alone. Lagos blinked beneath her. In the distance, generators hummed. Horns buzzed. But inside the lantern house it was still and alive. She opened a new page in her notebook and wrote one sentence. "This is not the end. This is the light staying lit." Then she closed the book, stood up, and walked down to the front steps, where someone, surely, was already waiting to be let in.